Cold rain had been falling since morning in Boston that November day. Emily Watson walked through the entrance of the luxury hotel, holding the hand of her 4-year-old daughter Grace. It was her sister Sophia's wedding day. "Grace, today is Sophia's wedding. Isn't it exciting?" Emily smiled at her daughter. Grace was wearing a new pink dress, her eyes sparkling with delight. "Yes. I want to see the dress." Seeing Grace's innocent smile, Emily felt warmth spread through her chest. Working at a small accounting firm while raising her daughter was far from easy. But this little person made it all worthwhile. There had been so many moments when she felt that way. The hotel ballroom was filled with lavish decorations. White roses and candles elegantly adorned the entire venue, with chandelier lights softly cascading down. Emily caught her breath. Her sister had always loved glamorous things, but she hadn't expected such an extravagant ceremony. Near the entrance stood her mother, Margaret. She wore a pale blue dress and seemed to have applied her makeup more carefully than usual. She appeared somewhat nervous. "Emily. Grace. I'm so glad you came." Margaret spread her arms wide to welcome her daughter and granddaughter. Emily kissed her mother lightly on the cheek. "It's been a while, Mom." "It really has. 3 months, maybe." There was a hint of loneliness in Margaret's voice. Since their father Robert had died suddenly 3 years ago, Emily had gradually distanced herself from her family. Rather than sharing grief, she had wanted to overcome it alone. She had been desperate to protect her small life with Grace. "Emily, you look pale. Are you tired?" Margaret peered at her daughter's face with concern. Emily laughed lightly in response. "I'm fine, Mom. Work's just been a little busy." Just then, a cheerful voice rang out from the back of the venue. "Sis. Thank you for coming." Her sister Sophia came running over. Despite it being before the ceremony, Sophia was already radiant. She wore a white robe-like dress, her hair freshly styled by a beautician. "Sophia, congratulations." Emily blessed her sister from the heart. The two had always played together as children. Though they had grown distant after their father's death, her wish for her sister's happiness remained unchanged. Grace came too. "You've gotten so big." Sophia gently stroked her niece's head. Grace shyly hid behind her mother. An attendant guided Emily to her seat. Table number 8. A somewhat inconspicuous spot at the edge of the venue. As Emily sat down, she looked around. At the other tables, relatives and her sister's friends were already engaged in cheerful conversation. At the neighboring table sat relatives from her father's side, but they merely glanced at Emily without speaking to her. "Mom, here we are." Grace sat down in her chair and pulled a small toy car from her pocket. Emily placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "It's a little lonely, but this is Sophia's day." Emily reminded herself of that. Sophia was the star. She didn't need to stand out. She and Grace would quietly watch the ceremony. That would be enough. Soon, music began to play. The guests grew quiet, everyone turning toward the entrance. Then Sophia appeared in a beautiful wedding dress. The pure white gown was adorned with delicate lace, a long veil swaying gracefully. The entire venue erupted in applause. "Sophia, you're beautiful," Emily murmured without thinking. Grace beside her had her eyes wide open. "Wow! She looks like a princess." Her daughter's innocent voice eased Emily's heart. The ceremony proceeded smoothly. The groom, Daniel Miller, wore an earnest smile. Standing beside Sophia, they looked like a painting. However, during the ceremony, Emily felt her mother Margaret's gaze several times. When she turned around, her mother was indeed looking her way. With a worried expression, or perhaps wanting to say something. Emily smiled back slightly, but a small sense of unease remained in her chest. "Mom, I wonder if something's bothering her," Emily murmured to herself. But she didn't think about it further. Today was her sister's special day. Her own concerns could wait. Holding Grace's hand, Emily quietly continued watching the ceremony. The wedding ceremony ended and the reception began. Guests returned to their respective tables as champagne was poured. Light music filled the venue, overflowing with laughter and conversation. Drinks were brought to Emily's table just like the others. Grace was already looking a bit bored. She swayed in her chair, running the toy car she'd taken from her pocket. Her small hands skillfully turned the wheels, moving the car from one end of the table to the other. "Grace, stay quiet, okay?" Emily spoke gently to her daughter. Grace nodded, but her gaze remained fixed on the toy. "Okay. Food will be here soon. Just be patient until then." Emily stroked her daughter's head while surveying the venue. At the bride and groom's table, Sophia and Daniel were chatting with guests. Her mother Margaret sat beside them, smiling happily. But occasionally, it seemed like she was looking this way. Emily wanted to believe it was her imagination. After a while, her mother Margaret walked over to Emily's table. The hem of her pale blue dress swayed as she appeared to be somewhat hurried. "Emily, did you drink some water?" Margaret stood before her daughter, peering at her face with concern. Emily held up her glass to show her. "Yes, I'm fine." "Well, but you look pale. Are you feeling all right?" "Mom, I told you I'm fine," Emily answered with some confusion. It was true she'd been tired from work lately, but not enough to collapse. Her mother's concern felt a bit excessive. "Really? If you need anything, tell me right away." "I will, Mom." "Thank you." Margaret nodded with satisfaction, but still wore an expression suggesting she wanted to say more. Nevertheless, she returned to her table. Emily let out a small sigh. "Mom worries too much," Emily murmured to herself, but at the same time felt it was a bit strange. Had her mother always been this anxious? Perhaps since their father's death, her expressions of affection toward her daughters had intensified. She decided to think of it that way. About 10 minutes later, Margaret returned again. This time she held a small napkin. "Emily, use this. You wouldn't want your hands getting dirty." "Mom, I already have one." Emily pointed to the napkin on the table. Margaret looked momentarily flustered but quickly put on a smile. "Oh, yes, but just in case." Margaret placed the spare napkin on the table before returning to her seat again. Emily tilted her head. Something about her mother's behavior was off. Normally, she wouldn't check on her this frequently. Was there something worrying her? Just then, she noticed Sophia looking her way from the bride and groom's table. When Emily met her eyes, Sophia immediately looked away. As if she hadn't wanted to be seen. Emily found it strange but didn't think deeply about it. "Sophia, is something bothering you?" Emily asked in her mind, but no answer came. Her sister was deep in conversation with the groom Daniel and didn't look her way again. She must be busy since it's her wedding. Emily told herself that. She shouldn't have time to worry about her. Yet why had she worn that expression? A complex look, similar to guilt. Emily shook her head, dismissing the thought. Grace started singing softly while running her toy car. Seeing her daughter's innocent figure, Emily felt somewhat relieved. Whatever happened, as long as she had this child, she'd be all right. She felt certain of that. The third time her mother returned was another 10 minutes later. This time she came empty-handed, simply standing beside Emily. "Emily." "Mom, what is it? Did something happen?" Emily looked up at her mother's face. Margaret's eyes clearly showed anxiety. No. I just wanted to make sure you were doing well. Mom, I really am fine. Don't worry. Margaret placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. The hand seemed to tremble slightly. Well, if you say so. Her mother said only that before returning to her seat again. Emily was bewildered. Her mother's behavior was clearly not normal. She seemed to be hiding something. But Emily couldn't imagine what it could be. Soon, the MC picked up the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be serving the main course shortly. Please look forward to it. Applause filled the venue. Guests waited with anticipatory expressions for the food to arrive. Emily was a bit hungry too. She'd been busy since morning and hadn't eaten properly. Mom, I'm hungry. Grace tugged at her mother's sleeve. Emily stroked her daughter's head. Soon, honey. Just a little longer. Grace nodded but immediately started playing with her toy car again. Each time her small hands pushed the car, the wheels spun on the table. Emily watched her daughter play with an affectionate smile. The sound of staff pushing carts loaded with food could be heard from the kitchen. The atmosphere in the venue grew even more festive. Guests' conversations became more animated, laughter increased. Emily took a deep breath. Her mother's strange behavior, her sister's inexplicable glances, surely it was all her imagination. For now, she'd enjoy the meal with her daughter. She decided that. Just then, the toy car slipped from Grace's hands. The small car rolled to the edge of the table and fell to the floor. The clatter could be heard even amid the venue's noise. Oh! It fell. Grace hurried to climb down from her chair. Emily tried to stop her daughter, but Grace was faster. I'll get it. No, I'll get it myself. Saying that, Grace ducked under the table. Emily smiled wryly. Her daughter had recently started wanting to do everything herself. If she thought of it as a sign of growth, it was endearing. Be careful. Emily lifted the tablecloth slightly to watch her daughter. Grace was searching under the table for the toy car. She could see the small back moving in the darkness. Where is it? Grace murmured quietly. She could see the toy car had rolled into the shadow of a table leg. But as she reached for the car, she noticed something white lying near it. What's this? Grace picked up the white paper before the car. It was small enough to fit in her little palm. It was too dark to see clearly, but something seemed to be written on it. Grace held the paper close to her eyes. She couldn't read the words yet. But at the top of the paper she could see, Table 8. Grace, who had just learned numbers in kindergarten, could recognize the number 8. And below that was a drawing. A drawing of a shrimp. That red shrimp with its curled tail. Grace's body froze instantly. Mom can't eat shrimp. That was something Grace had always been told. Emily had a shrimp allergy, and eating it would be terrible. So when they went to restaurants or cooked at home, Emily always checked carefully for shrimp. Grace knew that. Mom. Grace whispered in a trembling voice. What did this paper mean? Table 8, that was the table where Mom was sitting now. And the shrimp drawing. Could it be that the food being served to Mom contained shrimp? Grace's small heart pounded violently. Fear raced through her entire body. Something was going to happen to Mom. That premonition gripped the 4-year-old girl's heart. Grace hurried back up to the table. She'd already forgotten about the toy car. Still clutching the paper, she grabbed her mother's arm. Mom, let's go home. Right now. Emily was startled by her daughter's sudden words. Grace's face was pale, tears welling in her eyes. What? What's wrong? Please, let's go home. Grace's voice was trembling. Seeing her daughter's state, Emily instinctively knew something serious had happened. Her daughter didn't usually become frightened like this. "Grace, what's wrong? What happened?" Emily gently grasped her daughter's shoulders. Grace answered in a tearful voice, trembling. "Under the table, look." Emily followed her daughter's words and slowly peered under the table. Looking in the direction Grace pointed, she saw nothing. Just the floor and table legs. "There's nothing there." "No, this." Grace held out the paper she'd been clutching to her mother. Emily took the paper and focused her eyes. Even in the dim lighting, the writing on the paper was clearly readable. Table 8. Main dish, seafood pasta. Special instructions, add shrimp. Note, allergy confirmed. Emily's entire body froze. The paper in her hand felt cold as ice. Her heart pounded violently, her breathing became shallow. No matter how many times she read the words, they said the same thing. "This is..." Emily lost her voice. Shrimp allergy. She'd been unable to eat shrimp since childhood. If she ate it, her throat would swell and she'd have difficulty breathing. In the worst case, it could be life-threatening. Her entire family was supposed to know that. Why would there be an instruction to add shrimp to my table? The pieces of the puzzle began connecting in Emily's mind. Her mother's excessive concern. Her sister's inexplicable glances. And the words, "allergy confirmed," written on this paper. Someone is trying to make me eat shrimp. Emily's hands trembled. No, this wasn't a simple mistake. The fact that it said, "confirmed," meant someone deliberately, knowing about her allergy, had instructed that shrimp be added. Grace's small voice could be heard. "Mom, shrimp is bad, right?" Emily looked at her daughter. Tears overflowed in Grace's eyes, her small body trembling. This 4-year-old girl was trying to save her mother's life. That fact made Emily's chest tighten. "That's right." Emily firmly grasped her daughter's hand. A warm, small hand. This hand had tried to protect her. "Grace, thank you for finding this." Grace answered in a tearful voice. "I wanted to protect Mom." Emily hugged her daughter. The small body trembled in her arms. She had to protect this child. And she had to survive herself. Emily raised her head and surveyed the venue. Staff were bringing food almost to their table. In a few minutes, the shrimp-laden pasta would be placed at her table. And if she ate it without knowing, she'd collapse right here. "I have to get out of here now." Emily stood up. She gripped Grace's hand firmly and grabbed her bag. Her heart pounded violently, her mind was blank, but one thing was clear. She couldn't stay here. Emily began walking quietly, leading her daughter by the hand. None of the surrounding guests noticed. Amid the laughter and music, only Emily and Grace were quietly trying to leave the venue. But just a few steps from the exit, a voice called out. "Emily." It was her mother Margaret's voice. Emily stopped and slowly turned around. Margaret was hurrying toward them, looking flustered. Clear agitation showed on her face. Emily stared at her mother, still clutching the paper. Grace hid behind her mother, her small body trembling. "Where are you going?" Margaret's voice carried urgency. Emily didn't answer. She just stared at the paper in her hand. What this paper meant. The reason for her mother's excessive concern. Her sister's guilt-ridden glances. Everything connected at this very moment. Emily's lips trembled. She couldn't speak. Before her stood the mother who had given birth to her. But that mother. Mom. Grace's small voice brought Emily back to reality. She had to protect her daughter. That much was certain. Emily looked straight at her mother. Margaret's face showed agitation and something else, fear perhaps, or guilt. "We're leaving." Emily's voice was cold as ice. Margaret looked at her daughter's face in confusion. "What? Why? The meal hasn't even..." Cutting off those words, Emily thrust the paper in her hand toward her mother. The color instantly drained from Margaret's face. Her lips trembled, her eyes widened. "What is this?" Emily's voice was quiet, but beneath it simmered barely contained anger. Margaret stared at the paper, at a loss for words. "That's... Why did you instruct that shrimp be added to my table?" In the midst of the venue's noise, the space around them seemed to fall silent. Margaret tried to open her mouth but no sound came out. She only shook her head. "Answer me, Mom." Emily's voice trembled. Was it from anger or sadness? She herself didn't know. Her mother seemed about to collapse before her eyes. But Emily didn't back down one step. Surrounding guests began to notice their situation. Whispered voices could be heard. Some stood up, watching the scene. Just then, her sister Sophia came running over. The hem of her wedding dress fluttering, she rushed between them in a panic. "Sis, what are you doing?" Sophia's voice carried agitation. Emily showed her sister the paper too. "Sophia, did you know about this too?" The moment Sophia saw the paper, she turned her face away. That reaction told everything. Sharp pain shot through Emily's chest. "Answer me." At Emily's shout, the venue fell silent. The music stopped, all the guests were looking their way. The groom Daniel also stood in the distance with a bewildered expression. Sophia murmured quietly with trembling lips. "I'm sorry." At those words, Emily felt the strength drain from her body. But feeling Grace's small hand gripping hers, she held firm. "Sorry for what? Were you trying to kill me?" The venue buzzed. The guests' voices of surprise spread like waves. Sophia covered her face and began to cry. Beside her, Margaret also fell to her knees. "Emily, forgive me." Her mother's voice trembled and broke. Emily looked down at her mother with cold eyes. "Forgive you for what? Explain." Margaret, both hands on the floor, raised her face. Tears overflowed in her eyes, her makeup was ruined. "When your father died, there was an inheritance." Emily listened silently. Grace trembled slightly behind her mother. $5 million. Half for you and half for Sophia. What about it? Margaret wiped her face with trembling hands. "But Sophia's new husband has debts." Emily's eyes widened. Surely not, she thought. But her mother's next words made that premonition reality. "We thought, if you weren't here." The venue buzzed loudly again. Some guests stood up, trying to call staff. But Emily heard nothing. The inheritance would all go to Sophia. Margaret's confession was like a nightmare. Emily stepped back. She couldn't believe it. No, she didn't want to believe it. "So you tried to kill me?" Her mother didn't answer. She only cried with her forehead touching the floor. Sophia too, unable to meet her sister's eyes, just repeated, "I'm sorry." Emily's entire body shook. Anger, sadness, and deep despair swirled in her chest. You're my mother and sister." Her voice cracked. Tears threatened to overflow, but Emily desperately held them back. She couldn't cry in front of Grace. "You tried to kill me. For money." Margaret raised her face. It was distorted with tears and regret. "Emily, we had no choice." "No choice." Emily's shout echoed through the venue. "I'm your family. I'm your daughter." At those words, Margaret collapsed in tears again. Sophia too trembled with sobs. But Emily no longer felt any sympathy for them. Emily took her smartphone from her pocket. Her hands were shaking, but she firmly dialed 911. "Emily, wait!" Margaret cried out. But Emily put the phone to her ear. "Hello. I need to report a murder attempt." Emily's voice was surprisingly calm. On the other end, the operator was asking about the situation. Emily calmly explained everything, about the paper, the shrimp allergy, and her mother and sister's confession. Margaret pleaded, "Please, stop," but Emily didn't even turn around. "It's too late." Minutes later, the sound of sirens could be heard. The police had arrived. The guests were in confusion, the venue in an uproar. The groom Daniel stood stunned, unable to understand the situation. Police officers entered the venue. Emily presented the paper as evidence and explained the situation. Officers approached Margaret and Sophia and began questioning them. The two were arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and preparation for murder. Margaret, handcuffed, kept calling Emily's name until the end. But Emily never looked back once. Sophia too was led away crying. Her wedding dress was now dirty and wrinkled. The groom Daniel was also questioned on suspicion of conspiracy. The guests left and the venue simply stood stunned. No one could speak. The glamorous wedding had ended in this manner. One of the police officers spoke gently to Grace. "You're the one who found the paper." Grace nodded slightly. "I wanted to protect Mom." The officer smiled. "You're a brave girl." Emily hugged her daughter. The small body still trembled in her arms. Tears wouldn't stop. Sadness and gratitude toward her daughter overflowed. "Thank you, Grace. You saved my life." Grace buried her face in her mother's chest. "I love you, Mom." At those words, Emily finally allowed herself to cry. Tears ran down her cheeks and fell onto her daughter's hair. 3 months later, warm California sunshine streamed into the living room of a small apartment. Emily and Grace, having just finished unpacking in their new home, were welcoming a peaceful morning. "Grace, this is our new home." Emily smiled at her daughter while gazing at the blue sky visible through the window. Grace hugged her new toy and nodded happily. "As long as I'm with Mom, anywhere is fine." Those words warmed Emily's heart. 3 months since the Boston tragedy. They had started a new life in a new state. Her mother, Margaret Collins, had received a 15-year prison sentence for attempted murder and preparation for murder. Emily had calmly watched her mother, who cried until the end in court. Margaret suffered daily with regret in prison, but Emily never once visited. Letters occasionally arrived from the prison, but Emily discarded them unread. Her sister, Sophia Miller, received a 10-year sentence. The groom Daniel was acquitted due to insufficient evidence of conspiracy, but immediately divorced Sophia. He too lost his social credibility and had to close his real estate business. Letters also came from Sophia, but Emily likewise discarded them. "I won't look back at the past anymore," Emily told herself. Forgiveness wasn't always right. Protecting herself and her daughter was what mattered most. A year later, Emily and Grace's life had completely settled. Grace had made friends at her new kindergarten and attended happily every day. "Mom, I made a friend today." When Grace came home from kindergarten, she reported happily. Emily hugged her daughter. "That's wonderful." Emily too had started working at a new accounting firm, building good relationships with colleagues. No one knew about her past in Boston. That was comfortable for Emily. One Sunday afternoon, Emily and Grace were having a picnic at a nearby park. They spread a blanket on the grass and, while eating sandwiches, the two spent peaceful time together. Grace suddenly looked up at her mother. "Mom, is it just the two of us?" "That's right. But we're family, right? Emily grasped her daughter's hand. A warm, small hand. This hand had saved her life that day. Of course. You and I are family. Grace smiled contentedly. Emily thought to herself. That day, Grace saved me. My 4-year-old daughter saved her mother's life. My mother and sister were blood relatives. But they tried to kill me. Real family isn't about blood. It's about relationships where we protect and love each other. Grace and I are a family of 2. That's enough. The sunset began to gently illuminate the park. Orange light enveloped them. Grace rested her head on her mother's lap. I love you, Mom. Emily gently stroked her daughter's hair. I love you too, Grace. Forever. The two embraced quietly. In the distance, children's laughter could be heard. Birds flew among the trees, a gentle breeze caressing their cheeks. Emily closed her eyes. From now on, she and Grace would find happiness together. Overcoming all the pain of the past, all the betrayal. She would walk through a new life with this small daughter. As she made that vow in her heart, Grace's small voice could be heard. Mom, let's come to the park tomorrow too. Yes, of course. Emily smiled. Tomorrow, the day after, and forever after. As long as she was with this child, she could overcome any hardship. What real family meant, Emily had finally found the answer. Under the sky where the sun had set and stars began to shine, mother and daughter nestled quietly together. As a family of 2, yet complete.